All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to part 2 of our day exterior commercial. If you haven't seen the first part of the video, check the link in the description below. If you want to support the channel, if you want to see more behind the scenes content, if you want to see more breakdowns just like this, you can join the Patreon group also in the link in the description below. Okay, let's go. You'll remember, quick run through. We are shooting a son, a dad, and a daughter. They are outside their house. These two are about to go for a ride. They're going to zoom off and she's going to cry. And then we're going to exit the scene. Right? You've seen the last video. You know the problems that we are facing. The number one problem is as we are looking into this location, which is this shot here. Right? As we are looking into this location, number one, we only have 3 hours to shoot this entire scene. Number two, we don't want it to be dusk. We don't want it to be dawn. It's facing, the direction that we are facing with the camera is west. So we want the sun to come over here and we want it to backlight this house. The problem with backlighting the house is that our daughter is going to be underneath here. She's the hero of the ad. And then we're going to be doing close-ups inside here. Where are we going to bring the level? Is it going to be halfway decent? Is it going to match what's happening with the boys outside? Because this shadow is going to race across the ground. As the sun dips, this shadow comes out further and further and further and further. And that might be good or it might be bad. It's definitely bad if we are not prepped for it. Okay, so that is a reminder of where we left off. We come back here. You can see, what do we got there? 3 hours to get this done. Can we do it? Maybe not. Okay, so let's start with, well, should we start with the way that we shot it, or should we start with the solutions? Let's start with the solutions, then we can sort of walk in. We'll start with the wide shot. Now, the wide shot, we did not start with. Okay, schedule-wise, we didn't start with it. Why? Because if we started with it, right? Imagine the sun is up here, and the shot comes, and the sun comes down here. We would have a giant hotspot here on the ground, right? It would not all be flat. It would be really, really hot here, and really, really hot is hard to overcome. You can see how hot the ground gets back here. Really hot, hard to overcome because we would then have to expose for that area to stop it from being blown out. Like maybe on the Mini LF, definitely on the 35, you could still hold that area, so you might not have to expose for it, but you're going to want to account for a spot that bright. Whereas if you come back here, like see this ground, like this is what the ground would have looked like. So then you have them standing in light, and then you have her standing in shadow. We want to try and balance those areas out because we can't control the ground, right? And if we can't control the ground, that's what we have to set for. Okay, in terms of exposure-wise, I'm talking. So let's come in here. So what did we do for the wide? Well, for the wide, we waited until the sun was over here, and then it was casting a much longer shadow. You can see that where the camera is positioned, right? Where the camera positioned, there's still sun because we just put this little bit of fluff in front of the lens just to muck it up a little bit, to give it just that little bit of extra depth. Maybe it would have been nicer over here, right? Would have felt a little bit more full over here, but I can't remember why we did that, but that's the way that we did it. Most important part here, though, is sun back here. Blasting this way, everybody's flat. Now, you're saying, okay, well, I thought before, in the video before, you said that flat is no good. And I would say, yes, flat is no good, right? It's like an overcast day. If you just have flat, you have no shape. And that's almost as bad as having too much level. So we're going to have to overcome this in the closer up shots, okay? So that's the challenge here is how are we going to overcome this flatness when we spin around and look the opposite direction and when we come in and do her stuff. So if we come to the next setup, which is what we started with. We started with all the coverage looking in and looking out. And we did the coverage first, which is not normally how you would do it, right? Especially for the director or the talent. They want to see the wide shot. They want to see how it all fits together. It gives everybody a chance to understand the entire scene and see the space and see it worked out. It's not going to work for us. We just didn't have time in the day because we had to shoot it at 2:30. And that meant that the sun wasn't going to be in a good spot until about 5 o'clock to shoot that wide. It wasn't going to be low enough. So what's the solution? The solution is over here and over here. You put 2 stands, and then you put a giant 20 by 20 of highlight, and that creates this huge soft, see this square in the helmet there? I don't know if you can see that. If we zoom in a little bit, you might be able to see this? That little thing there? That's a giant thing of highlight. And that makes the light significantly less harsh, right? Is it realistic? No. Does it look better than harsh sunlight balanced with the background? Yes. Yes, absolutely it looks better. Why? What does it do to the ground? Here you can see. Right here, that's that break between highlight and actual sun. Under here, you have highlight, right? See the diffusion in the helmet itself? That's overhead. This shadow here, overhead shadow. This is what it looks like. Now, the secret to doing overhead shot is you don't want to see the ground, or you don't want to shoot off the overhead. Sometimes you'll see, I always reference like CSI or what's another show that uses overheads in the middle of the day? Yeah, like those crime shows, CSI Miami, CSI, or NCIS or something like that. You'll often see like the detectives just under a giant 20 by, and they'll try and like hang leaves or branches off the sides of it so the shadow looks a little bit more realistic. But here, we covered the entire ground. That way we don't have to worry about the giveaway that you're using an overhead. And if we come over here, I'll show you the behind the scenes. Where is it? I mean, yeah, look at where we're setting up the overhead. We've got one stand here out of the way, and I think that might be the only stand because we were able to lay it on the actual roof itself. Let's come over here. See how it's sandbagged on the roof over there? So that's the 20 by 20 going up. And then we place all of the action in here. And what I'm going to do with the sides here of the 20 by is I'm going to lay or hang black fabric, right? So that becomes the neg that we're going to use to create some shape. Okay, so even though the light is supposed to be coming backlit, we're going to take away all this front lit light in all of the close-up shots because that takes away shape. And we're fighting for shape, ladies and gentlemen. So don't do that. Let's see. Oh, you can see it here. Like this is this side of the wall over here. This side of the wall is all this black here because I'm actually shooting this shot. Okay, so that gives you an idea. We're creating like a tint of highlight over top and then black all around to take away all of the bounce from here because look at how extreme this bounce is coming off the ground. Right? That's going to pollute all of our shadows. It's not going to look very nice. And we want it dark and down. So this is the stuff that we started with, this shot here. And you can see now, I'm setting exposure for over here because that's going to be the brightest thing in the image. I set that where I want it on the aperture. And then you toss in your ND to be able to shoot then wide open from there. We've got our overhead. And then we've got, see in the helmet here, you can see the black. So that's black running down the side, black running down this side. And this is just like basically top light, a 20 by 20 highlight, just giving us this top light, right? That's all it is. And then it's black everywhere else. So now we are going back to our first video and deciding, okay, this is an office scene between these two people. This is going to be the shadow side, and this is going to be the lit side over there. But instead of lighting from the ground, we're lighting from overhead with the 20 by 20 highlight. From there, we shot the same direction. No, we didn't, did we? Oh yeah, okay. So from that shot, we have it all set up. We're gonna go swing around to this shot. Okay, so we swing around to here, and I'm pretty sure we did, let's see if we come in here. I'm pretty sure we did, no we didn't. I was gonna say we might have done this shot and this shot together, but we didn't because you can see the shadow difference in the background, right? You see this shadow here. So now this is we did this after we did this. Because this is earlier in the day, the sun is a little bit higher, and this is later in the day, okay? So we come in here, we'll start with this shot. Again, because we have the stand over here for our 20 by, and we're laying it on top of the building, this is the roof of the building over here, these two are able to be under the overhead, and over there, you see this ground over here? That's not under the overhead. So that's super hot light out there. So again, that's what we're balancing to. That's super bright light. And underneath, you can see just how dark it is here. This is the left-hand side of the woman underneath the awning. But now, because we have this black over here, you can kind of see there is a little bit of shape, which means we are getting a little bit more level from here. So even though it's completely unrealistic, I like it better. I like it better than pushing all the level this way when you have shadows in the background going the opposite way, right? I would rather this look than having smushing somebody from both sides and going darker on this side. Okay? So, but that's how you do it. There's nothing on the ground. We're not bouncing anything back. In fact, we're taking everything we can away and only using the overhead. But this only works, you know, you can't do this with an 8x overhead. You can only do it with a 20x overhead. So if you don't talk about this stuff on the Tech Scout, you're going to be in serious trouble. Maybe if you show up with a 12x or something like that. Okay, the next shot, you can see, again, this is just an example. Now the shadow is getting longer over here, so we don't have to worry about like this, where it gets hot. That's the coverage of the 20x. And then over here is the coverage of the building, because now we have shadow in the background. So we do all the close-up stuff first, and then as the sun starts to set lower and lower and lower, this shadow out here gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and now we can start to come out and pull back. So we don't have like a giant, just imagine this level of light. Imagine it running right through the middle of the scene. Like it would be super hot out here. And there would be no way to tame it, which means we'd have to iris down or ND down, which means this becomes even darker. And now we can't see her at all. And I just didn't like that look. Like, I don't want that. It looks like kind of hot garbage. Okay, next, before we moved on to this, because we were getting through this stuff too fast, right? Before we moved on to the wide, we come and we do our little dolly shot here, our push-in. Now you can see, this is where the plan sort of falls over. Because remember, now she is talking and looking at these guys, right? So this is the flop of this shot. So ideally, if we talk about our lighting, ideally, all of this level should be coming the other direction. Now, because there's that house there, it just doesn't work. I tried to sell it. Nobody liked it except for me. And sometimes you just got to eat it. It's like, did it look natural? No, didn't look natural. Like light was just coming out of the building. It looked like, even though I tried to flag it off, it didn't work. So we end up just going with the overhead and still having all of the blacks in place, but we just left it like, just looks kind of natural this way. And I mean, it does make sense because in the wide, if we come over here, in the wide, like you wouldn't have light coming this way, even though that's what I wanted. It just didn't make any sense. So we just used, because we had our overhead in here, as you come in, imagine her, we just also turned her out a little bit more to fake that conversation rather than looking this way. And then the overhead just gives you like a natural wrap from overhead. And even though we blacked everywhere, it just lets a little bit more in on the edge. And that's how you end up with this look, okay? Which is these two. Here, you can feel way more level on this side than on this side. Even still, like let's come back to our behind the scenes shot. Where is it? Yeah. So this is the shot happening, right? Even still, this is us filming this shot. Look at all the neg that is all around on the key side, right? This is the side that the key light is coming from. Oops. And we've got just neg everywhere to get that limited amount of tiny, tiny, tiny little leak. Actually, this is a good shot. I forgot to talk about this. This is a good shot of just how much neg and how close it is for all of the stuff looking this way on these two. Right? And you can see the difference in the ground between natural sunlight and under the overhead, right? Big, 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 massive difference. So overheads are your friend. The problem that people run into when they have overheads is that they don't close up the sides. If you don't close up the sides with neg, it looks really, really bad. It looks really, really fake and super unrealistic. Now, does this look realistic? No. Does it look better than not closing up the sides? I think so. Why? Because at least we have some contrast and some crunch and some shadow and some darkness. Anyway, that's what I like. Okay, what else do I have to talk about? Oh, well, let's just talk about the wide then. So finally for the wide, now we've left this until the last thing. The sun now is over here. You can see this shadow in here is growing, starting to creep in. But all of this now is all in shadow, which sets up our flatness, which matches, at least in a world, and this is straight out of the camera, these stills, you can start to balance them and make them feel way more realistic. So we can lift her up, we can lift their faces up, we can bring down this in the background, we can raise the sky up a little bit if we want, if we feel like that's too far down. But even in the wide shot, like what are we looking for? We're looking for shape, right? We're looking for different angles, different layers on top of one another. We've got the trees, we've got the sky, then we've got the house itself, then we've got the picnic table, then we've got them, then we've got this. You know, you're talking 6, 7 layers in a wide shot. And what we don't want to do is just be flat plonk on them, because that looks like hot ass and we don't want that. Next is our leaving shot. Leaving shot, this is 2 cameras right at the end of the day. Now you can see how far out that shadow on the ground has gotten. All right, look at how far now that shadow has gone from back there on that, when we were looking at the 2 shot that direction, to now it's way out here. So much, much, much different. And what we did here, I'm pretty sure, let's see, is it in this shot? No, I'm pretty sure what we have here, this is one time sun sandwich, is she's in here and there's just no level for her, right, in there. So I'm pretty sure we have parked over here an 8x, just pushing a little bit of level back into the house. But here, I like this one better than, if you remember the board shot. The board shot was from a crane shot over here looking this way. Well, looking this way, they ride past us, so wiping the frame, which is kind of nice. And also we've just got lots of shadow and lots of light and lots of depth in this image, and even more so in the B camera shot. So I think this was my camera shot, and I think this was Elliot's over here. You know, he's just got like this little foreground element on a longer lens. As you know, the longer lens gets you a little bit more drawn out drive-by from these two. But I think in the final edit, I think they went with this shot just because it gives you a little bit more scope. So here, again, what am I exposing for? I'm exposing for the sky, and probably for this little thing here, setting this where I want it, this highlight, and then everyone else just stays. But the reason that this shot is possible, and the reason that it looks halfway decent, is imagine if we started with this shot, right, with the sun super high in the sky, and it was super hot on the ground back there, and there was, maybe it was still like we were still catching a little bit of front light on this building. Well, we don't want a lot of front light because that kills the shape. We want the sun behind. Why am I doing this with this pen today? We want the sun behind the building so that we get shade to camera and then little spots of highlights, right? Little highlight on their helmet, little highlight on their helmet, dark to camera. Okay, so really the big thing here was, well, where is the light going to come from in all of the coverage? Can it come from like the opposite side? Can it come from the sun side? The answer is not really, but we can fake it with an overhead. And once we get in an overhead, we know that, for example, like let's come in here to this shot. If we have here an overhead and you don't put in the neg, there's going to be more level still coming from this side, right? Because you're just hitting the ground with all this level and it's just going to leak in. I've got black here and then black all over the ground as well. Soak up all the ground stuff, because that is, yeah, that's what fills things in. It just takes away all of our shape. So you can definitely do overhead bad. And I know because I've done overhead bad in the past. And how did I do it? I didn't close it in. Okay? Do yourselves a favor. Close it in. So we took, 3 hours, a pretty tricky scenario given the location, right? If this building wasn't here, this would have been, we wouldn't have had to put an overhead in at all, right? If this building was here, we could have backlit this entire thing and shot it from the shadow side. Like again, from the shadow side, if this building isn't here, this thing is already backlit and we can shoot the whole thing this way. It makes it really easy to shape. I mean, maybe for the close-up stuff, we could soften it a little bit on these two, or add a little, we'd still add a little neg and maybe add a little backlight, like a little back edge here. But it's because of the location and because of the building in the background that we have to come up with solutions for how hot it's going to be in the foreground versus how dark it's going to be for our star back here underneath the awning. Okay, so let me know what you think. Let me know if you've got any other questions on how this stuff gets done, or the schedule, or the steps. I'm trying to cover every base here. I mean, you see how little is done on the day. So much of it is done. Like the look is completely decided by the schedule and then the approach that we're going to take to orient the talent to the camera and the light to the camera. Once those things are set, it's really not screwing up the exposure and making sure that you that you understand, okay, these little 1% wins, like having the nig slightly closer, having it further back, those are the things that you should be thinking about on the day, and being open to any changes that might come up and being flexible and having a plan that isn't going to just lock you into one direction or one area. And then, eventually things happen, panic ensues, and yeah, you never get another job. Let's hope that's not you. Okay, that's going to do it for this one. Many thanks. We'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.